Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And today we are talking about natural birthing, a subject that's very close to my heart, with a wonderful lady. It is June Tranmer. Hello.
Hello, Anna. It's lovely to see you again.
It's what you do is for me so beautiful that I would call it magical. So tell us about what you do.
Oh gosh. Well, I feel like magic does seem to come into my awareness every single day. I've just finished doing a day full of mini seated massages with Chinese massages I do on my Thursdays. And I was showing people some kinesiology techniques. And, people keep giving me that feedback that if this is magical, this is just magical. And it's so lovely because working with energy is, and that's what we're doing all the time, every single day in our lives and in our work. I mean, I know you work with hypnotherapy, don't you, as well? And I think, I mean, not as well because I don't, but that energy is a very important part of your work. And I think gradually more and more people are coming to realize that we are not just bodies. We're not just lumps of wood but even the lumps of wood have energy, and yeah, it's fascinating, and especially regarding children and birth and the mystery of the creation of a new life, or the vessel that a spirit can come to the world in. That is our job as birth keepers, birth assistants. I'm one of Nikita Stark's team, if you like. And Yeah, but prior to that, I was training in acupuncture many years ago, and then went on to specifically do extra training, helping women in childbirth, well, in pregnancy and then in childbirth, and then went on to study the treatment of children. So it was just like a really natural progression for me to do that, to then when the opportunity to come to came to train with Nikita in 2023, is it? Oh, it might have been 22. I just jumped at it because, it spoke to me, it spoke to my heart. And I hadn't been attending births that much lately. That was very much more at the beginning of my acupuncture career. And then I thought, no, no, this is time. This is time now, because I could see the way things were going. I mean, I was seeing so many younger and younger women having struggles getting pregnant. And I'm going, what's going on here? This is not right. So, there's all sorts of various causes for this. I think there are environmental influences, there are hormone disruptors around us in the food we eat, in the air we breathe, in the water we drink, and in the stresses of modern life. Our hormones are all over the place, and of course, in certain medications that people are taking, they are very much influencing their hormones. And we know this because studies have been done on animals and plants, and their reproductive capabilities have been disrupted as well. Fish, there's all loads of stuff about fish and their strange mutations and whatnot. So I got started getting more and more of those kinds of people, young women in their 30s who could not conceive. And so I didn't end up going to that many births because I think people were getting all IVF and that kind of thing. And so then they just went into the medical route. And so, yeah, I mean, it's still magical. It's still magical no matter wherever it happens. This being coming into its existence for this lifetime, and I think it's amazing.
You referenced Nikita Stark, and for those who did not see that interview or who watched it but don't remember it, Nikita is the founder of When Push Comes to Shove, and is all about giving women choice in the way that they give birth and helping them through that process. So here you are, you have this experience as an acupuncturist, and maybe it might be good to get a sense of how acupuncture works because we've not had an acupuncturist before. So, and you were talking about the shifting of energy. And so, June, explain how that works to us and why that would be relevant in terms of fertility, and then how that could support women through pregnancy and labor.
Mm. Yeah, well, there's ever such a lot to it in some ways, although it's not. It's really quite simple and straightforward, and it is about balance. It's always about making the optimum environment for the body to do what it needs to do, because as Nikita told you, and as she always says, the body knows what to do if we just give it a chance. And all we need to do is stand back, really, in most cases. But sometimes we do need to give a little bit of support. So the our role as women is to balance the yin and the yang, and the female part of the yin and the yang is the yin, and also we all have a yang part as well. But to be properly able to conceive, we need to be in the height of the yin and our most receptive. And if we are constantly rushing around, trying to be the same all the way through our cycle, trying to compete with men, trying to be out there in the workplace, achieving, 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 and never getting. I was listening to who was it? Some other podcast just the other day about how women need to, I remember who it was now. Women need to come home and settle and have some relaxing time to get, and well, I think men do as well, but particularly women, to get back in touch with their own yin on the inside. And so I think that's one thing that we always look at is how the balance of the yin and the yang is in the woman, and try and work with the meridians to balance those up. So there are many ways you can influence um, the energy to change, and what you're trying to do is nurture as much as possible where there's a lack of nurture. And it does go back to like your previous interview with Cheriona, about how people's own experiences of birth influence them, but their own upbringing as well. And we find ourselves repeating things because they're stuck in our unconscious or in our body, in our body memory. So I think our job really is to just help people get back in touch with that. The longer I've been doing this, and it's now nearly 40 years, it's like that I realize we have to stand back more and more and interfere less and less. And when I first started treating children, I was always asking this question: are we interfering with their karma, with their destiny, by trying to take away suffering? Because I mean, that's a large part of what acupuncture is known for, is reducing pain, and reducing suffering, and taking away things like eczema and asthma, and helping people find their better way through things. And I think, well, you know what, all you can do is offer, and you're offering help and support, and then the person, however small or however old they are, however long something has been with them, and it can have come through from lifetimes. A lot of babies that I've seen, you can tell that something that's bothering them is not just from their own limited few months of life in this lifetime. And I don't follow a particular religion, but I do believe that we have been here before and we have accumulated knowledge, but it's not in the brain as such. It's in our soul in a way, I guess, mostly. So I don't know. I haven't got very specific. Have I answered that question? I kind
Well,
of do this. I go off
you
and
you have, because you're talking about acupuncture, and you're talking about, the importance of balancing the energy, and that's the aim of acupuncture, and that you're looking at specific points of energy in the body, to help balance that energy of yin and yang. And something you said there that I thought was very interesting is how, and we're not telling women that it's wrong to work. Heaven knows that we both do. Um,
Mm, mm,
and we're not telling women that it's wrong to have a career. That's not what you're saying.
mm-mm,
But what you're saying is specifically that conception is a yin. It's like a precondition that we connect with the yin within us, so that we are in that our bodies are physically able to conceive. So this is beyond the things that a woman might do to
mm,
be healthy. And you talked about environmental stressors. So it's about cleaning up the diet, and just making sure that the body is as healthy as possible. But beyond that, it's about getting into a state of mind. And because a state of mind in which is ready for conception has within it the emotional prerequisite of being ready to receive the child. And so then the body is able to build
mm,
the body of the child, etc. So, and that is a very yin thing. And what you're talking about is helping through acupuncture get that balance of energy, which sounds, I think, for a lot of people, as a very new concept. So I think it's an insight into how acupuncture actually works. That yes, you're working with the meridians of the body. Yes, there is a track record, a really good track record that's recognized to the point where many NHS trusts actually are employing acupuncturists to help, with post-cancer treatments, helping people recover, etc. So there's a very long and well-known track record that acupuncture has. And what you demonstrated there is that at the heart of it is the ability to help energy flow in different ways according to the need. So yes, you did answer the question. And the next thing that you said that might have raised some eyebrows is the question of, interfering with karma, for, in terms of alleviating suffering. But that alleviation of suffering may be part of the karma too. So
of course.
second guess,
Mm,
we can't second guess. And
mm,
so it's always in life, there is what presents itself,
mm,
and there is the intention behind the reaction, and there is the intention behind the human interaction of two human beings, one coming in to support another in a time of crisis, in a time of suffering. So I think that that's a kind of taking us off in another philosophical direction. But it's interesting that you raised it, and my answer to that is um, that the act of receiving help is also potentially part of karma, and
sure.
to discover the alleviation of suffering is there is also a very important part of the soul's journey and development and learning, because we all have to learn how to receive help when it's available, because it's about getting in touch with our vulnerability so that we might also then grow in empathy and help others in that point. So
I
that's
like the way you say that. Yeah, that's lovely.
so I think that that's quite important.
Mm.
So let's come back then. It this is and focus on natural births. And
Mm.
so there are a lot of women out there who are going to say, no, that's painful, don't want to do that. And off, you know, and I don't want to be in labor in hours. I've got the potential to have a cesarean. I'm just going to do that. And in any case, the doctors recommended it.
Mm.
Natural birth, why? We've gone beyond that, haven't we? We've got technology.
And a lot of people do think that that is the way forward. In fact, um, I've made very good friends with a lovely midwife who was at a birth I was at last summer. And she's in the system in Leeds, and she's very frustrated by the fact that the technological kind of birth, it's not about not having pain or having lots of pain. Those aren't the two main choices. It's about being present. It's about being in your experience. And that's kind of goes back to the karma thing. If you don't learn whatever it is you're meant to learn from each little bit of life experience that you have, whether it's joy, whether it's suffering, whether it's hard work, or whether it's whatever your life path is. And I think she's very much now wanting to step out. She said to me that the statistics are such that 60% of births in Leeds are now cesareans. Yeah.
Let's just digest that for a minute.
Yeah, that was my reaction. I kind of stopped breathing and I just went, no. Because I knew it was creeping up, but it's like that many?
And there is no conceivable reason for this, because our ancestors, the women before us, managed to propagate the species without 60% cesarean rate.
Yeah.
So let's backtrack.
And the ones who didn't, they didn't all die either. I mean, see, this is the thing that is given to people to kind of say, well, if you're not going to go along with the technology, it's dangerous and you're going to lose your baby or lose your own life. And that specter kind of hangs over people that they must get the baby out at all costs, and it doesn't really matter how much both of them suffer on the way out, that as long as there's a living birth at the end of it. And I think that
Okay,
has gone deep into a lot of people. Mm.
so the story that we're given is that historically there was a high incidence of infant mortality, and that there was a high incidence of complications in birth, and that women died in childbirth on a regular basis,
Yeah.
which kind of goes counter to the reality of exploding populations, etc. And yet, it is true that there was infant mortality and that women did die during labor, without thinking about statistics, because people can argue statistics and use statistics to prove their point, because numbers can be manipulated.
Mm.
In your mind, what would the historical stresses have been that would have prevented women from surviving childbirth or contributed to high infant mortality. Let's look at those stressors, because if we can understand what they were, we can ask ourselves, have things changed?
Mm-hmm.
And should we be afraid if those were the stressors? So let's, what in your mind would the stressor
Yeah.
be?
Well, if you want statistics, Nikita's really good at statistics. She's got loads of them, and I do have lots of notes about that, but I can't keep them in my head to save my life. So, I think in a way that's important. People can research that themselves if they want to. And in actual fact, most babies did survive. There was very small percentage that did not, and very small percentage of women who often had complications, and they still happen, but because there are good, quick response rates to things like excessive bleeding, which is often the case. If a woman has a placenta that comes apart really easily, and there's too much, the detachment of the placenta from the uterine wall doesn't happen smoothly and properly, then she can bleed a lot. There's lots that can be done with acupuncture to help with that, to be honest. And there's also medicines that can help. But usually that happens because someone has mistakenly thought they needed to pull on the umbilical cord to get the placenta out instead of waiting for it to come out naturally. So there's that kind of thing. And that could have happened at any time in history if people were worried. It happens more often now, actually, in hospital settings because they give women an extra bit of oxytocin or synthometrin, the fake oxytocin, to get the uterus to push out the placenta. But if you don't time it exactly perfectly, then the placenta is going to get trapped inside because the uterus closes down on it. So that's why they end up pulling on it, and they really, really shouldn't. But that can happen at a home birth too. It could happen. Mostly though, home births are intrinsically safer because a woman is more relaxed. She feels more in control, and she's more in touch with her feelings. When you're in a hospital setting, which has been only in the last few generations, really, like my grandmother gave birth at home, and it was only my mother who started, both my grandmothers, um, and my mother's generation were the ones that ended up in the hospitals. I was born in the 1950s in Canada, and my dad was outside the room. He wasn't involved. He wasn't emotionally involved, and that's the thing that can happen at a home birth, which is the most natural birth. I mean, all births are natural to that extent that the baby is coming out, and it's a life. But yeah, this kind of pushing out of one part of the couple that created the baby is really unreasonable. And I think taking them out of their home is also unreasonable. So those kind of things that would have happened in the past that caused women to have difficulties in childbirth were mainly due to malnutrition, poor housing conditions, and lack of hygiene. It's not about germs; it's about cleanliness. That's really important to stress there. It's about cleanliness and and trying to make sure that the person is in the best possible state in all ways round. And in the past there were very different levels of society. There was the lower economic levels. They were the ones who really suffered the most. The ones with the money could afford fabulous birth attendants, and they managed to have much better birth rates, I suspect. I
Okay.
don't have any statistics to prove this, but I think that's probably what happened.
I think it's fair to say that it is true that the stressors that you mention are definitely going to be the main determinants of whether a baby is going to survive in infancy or not, and whether a woman is going to struggle in labor. If a woman is strong, if she is well fed, if she is healthy, the odds of her being so weak that she's exhausted and dies are lower, or the complications of different types that come in are much reduced. um, and I think we can actually, we're talking about things historically, but we can look in our time and make comparisons between places where poverty is rife, and see there that the infant mortality is higher, and we can see there that more women might die in labor, although their populations are thriving, so clearly that's still not going to be the majority situation.
Mhm.
And then we make that comparison and we can say, okay, well, if those are the stressors, the main stressors, what's going on here that we have become so afraid of natural childbirth that we are basically medicalizing a natural process?
Mm.
And I think that is, a question that we need to be asking ourselves as a society. Because as you've said, a hospital is an alien environment. And I can tell you that when I have worked with pregnant women using hypnosis to prepare them for labor, the biggest issue that they face is they go into the hospitals feeling confident and calm, ready to give birth. They are told that that cannot be because they are too relaxed and clearly not suffering enough, which then stresses them out.
Yep.
And the point, and I can remember one woman saying to me, oh, everything was good until they said to me that can't be happening, realized that I was right and that it was, went into a panic, which made me then panic.
Mm.
And at that point, things began to change.
Mm.
And it was everything was fine. The baby was coming and she was ready. All they needed to do was take her to the place where the baby, she could give birth, stay nice and calm. The baby would have come out. Instead of which, they took one look. They said, no, it can't be happening. And she said, no, it is. They took one look and then went, oh, the baby's coming. And the whole thing threw her. So,
And did they do an internal examination? Because that's another thing
yeah.
that they
And
feel they
all of,
must do that in order to, they can't look at the woman and tell. See, my mother-in-law was a midwife back in the day, in the 1940s and 50s. And she said that modern midwives get too involved with the machinery for measuring everything, and they don't use their own eyes and ears. And you can tell, I mean, this lovely midwife that I've met from Leeds, she can tell she's really connected to the process. And she's been through the mincer in going through the whole medical training and everything, but she's kept in touch with her instincts, and she can tell when a woman is ready to give birth. She can tell by the smell in the room, the look of the woman, that there's a markers that come on the lower body. You can just she's learned all those things, and it's just wonderful to see that. But yeah, this whole obsession with having to measure things, and somebody sticks their hand inside of you, to be blunt about it, that's a marker for an invasion. And it's that you're then it's known that that slows down the labor right then and there. But very few women are going to be able to say, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Some manage to do it, but it's very few, want to. They don't want to have an argument in the middle of labor either. That is the other thing. A doula is not there to create an argument. That is the really important thing. The birth keeper is not there to be a warrior woman to stand up for something, because then you create a confrontation. The important thing is for everybody to work together as a team. And I've assisted at births in hospitals, which have turned out lovely, and I've assisted at births at home that have turned out lovely too. And some of them have ended up going to hospital because the midwives deemed it necessary. Um, Moving people in the middle of second stage, not your favorite thing to do, but sometimes these things have to happen. And I guess, it's about, like we were saying before we started the conversation, it's about going with the flow of things, but also me being able to have an agreement with the midwives, to be able to use what I can of my tools to help keep things flowing during the labor, and to help things when they slow down, or indeed slow them down a little bit when they're going too fast, so that the woman doesn't feel like she's on a roller coaster, that it's a little more steady and even. That's the kind of thing I like to most do in my work. Mm.
So, besides acupuncture, are there other modalities that you use to help women, um, particularly during labor?
Yeah, yes. The kinesiology part of my work, there's some lovely knowledge that fits together with the acupuncture, because kinesiology came from a merging of the knowledge of acupuncture meridians and the knowledge of the structure of the body with the muscles. So there's that kind of knowing about which muscles are being involved, which meridians you don't have to use needles either. That's the other important thing to say, because actually, if someone's trying to move around during labor, which is the ideal thing, really, some people don't want to. I get that, but ideally, it would be good to be moving around, just to make sure that things are staying flexible. Um, and to keep the baby coming in the right direction, so that they so many times they do end up getting confused, and which way is the way out. Am I turning this way, am I turning that way? And they're responding to the pressure of the muscles contracting around them, and they're trying to find their way. So there's this wonderful technique that Nikita introduced me to, that I've got to now, I think I want to learn more about. It's called spinning babies, and it's I think it's an American woman mainly who's doing this training, but you get the woman into position where she can juggle, her body, so that the baby finds the best way around. And you'll see in in films of old times, people giving birth with blankets, and being juggled with blankets, and I think, and a large cloth anyway, and I think that was maybe a traditional way in different cultures that they used. So it's there's very interesting things to be brought in. And I do use I'm not a homeopath, but there is a homeopathic birthing kit available that a lot of families do use. So I help them with that, because when you're in labor, you're not really able to look things up in a booklet and go, which thing do I feel like? And so you can actually help them with that a little bit. But I must stress, I'm not a homeopath. Mm.
I love that. I love that you can, as a mother giving birth, if the baby is getting a little bit lost, help them find the exit by moving your muscles in a particular way to say, yeah, no, not that way, but this way.
Mm.
That that is absolutely amazing. I love that. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and there's also a lovely thing we can do during pregnancy, which helps them turn around if they're breech. Now, if somebody, see, this is what I mean about the karma thing. If they're meant to come breach, they will come breach. And that's their life experience that they've intended to have, I think, if they've planned it out that way. So, if they don't want to turn around, they won't. But a lot of times they get confused which way is up. So there's a thing we can do with moxa, which is mugwort and moxibustion, and we light the I've got some here actually. We've got these, as I always have some with me. That's the moxa sticks. Which one's open? I've got two. Okay. Well, both of them seem brand new. I don't know. Yes, I put them in this wooden thing, and there's the snuffer, and you put the moxa stick in there, and you light it, and then you can hold it over the little toe. This is my foot now, not my hand. Hold it over the little toe on the outside, the acupuncture point there, and it warms that up, and it sends the energy to the baby and encourages it to go head down. I mean, there's all sorts of studies being done about the chemistry of that or the whatever, but to me it's energetic, and it's like the baby will go toward it's oftentimes its head will go up towards its mom's heart because it loves listening to the heartbeat. But really what it needs to do is be encouraged to head down, please. And so we try and warm it so that it goes, oh yeah, there's warmth that way too. Yeah, so it's
I love that. What do you feel about the timing as the from the baby's perspective? So, some babies seem to not want to come out when they are due, and
Mhm.
others seem ready to come out before they are due. I was certainly born 2 weeks before I was due. I was fine, but nevertheless, out I came before anybody expected me. And then there are others who come in who come later. So, what is your feeling? Is there, because we're used to thinking that the birth must happen within a particular period of time.
Yeah.
Do you feel that we're a little bit too rigid on that? Or is it true that that's a time and, anything before or after is a danger point? What's your feeling?
Well, again, it's like Western medicine always looks for the problem. Instead of going, okay, let's just see what mostly happens. And, they could do the research and study how many babies come early or late and thrive. They're absolutely fine. But instead, they do get a little bit hung up on this is going to be a problem, and therefore we need to manage it, because that's what they do really well. When there's a crisis, they are really good at managing that. But sometimes they tend to create the crisis by believing that 40 weeks is the cutoff point, and if the baby hasn't come by then we need to get it out. That's kind of the blunt description of that attitude. But 42 weeks is fine as long as there's no signs of distress in the baby. And you can monitor that without too much invasive testing and stuff like that. You can listen with the little trumpet thing, the pinard, and you can just tell by talking to it. It, she, they, them, him, whoever you want to call them. Um, but yeah, I mean, and the mum should know if she's really in touch with what's going on, she will know, her instincts will know. But unfortunately, I think we've been these last, oh, I don't know, decades. I don't know how long it's been, but our instincts have been undermined.
Yeah.
We're not really encouraged to listen to that. Like you said about this woman going in, it's going, I'm the baby's coming. Oh no, it can't be. You're wrong. This, how many people tell you this when they come to you in your practice? And they've told me this millions of times. I was told I was wrong, and I'm going, no, well, you actually are right. You know, they, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that there are guidelines in terms of kind of landmark moments of development,
Hmm.
but every baby is individual and every woman is individual, and that we ought not be applying a manual strictly to a timetable and allow things to develop, because otherwise we could be creating complications where there don't need to be any through that intervention. So, okay, baby's been born. What does a baby need immediately after it's born?
But it needs its mum. It needs skin to skin contact. It needs to do that. I mean, I don't know if Nikita, because I haven't listened to the whole thing that your chat with Nikita, but one story she does tell that sticks with me, and I've not seen this happen yet because the circumstances have been different. If someone's in a birthing pool, it's trickier to do, but what needs to happen really is that they get plopped on the mum's tummy and they will crawl up to the breast while pushing with their feet on the tummy of the mum to help encourage the uterus to expel the placenta. How beautiful is that?
That is beautiful. Several times whilst we've been talking, I've been thinking about animals, and because we have not yet medicalized their birthing.
Oh yeah, they have. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I've seen vet programs where they've
yeah,
done
they have.
cesareans on lambs. Yeah, they
I,
have
yeah, no, but not
sometimes, but
not to the same extent.
not to the same
So,
extent.
so we still have the experience of um, watching births without interference. I think that's what I'm getting at.
Hmm.
And I remember a breeder talking to when we went to get Teddy, our dog, and I asked her, "So are you there whilst the birth, the puppies are being born?" And her saying to me, it's best to leave them because that helps the mother to relax. And that was interesting. And I remember watching this was on TV actually, a woman who her dog was having puppies and saying, it might even be her cat having kittens. I can't remember now which species, but it doesn't matter. But her saying how honored she was that the animal had come to her so that she could be there in the birthing time, because she said that doesn't normally happen.
Mm.
So there it is, right there. Don't interfere, because guess what's going to happen? Cortisol is going to go up and oxytocin is going to go down, the very thing that you need to have a more comfortable labor. So
Yeah.
there is that.
Yes, nobody wants to give birth with an audience,
No,
or just, a raft of students standing around. That happens. I mean, they have to learn, but it's really difficult. Can
yeah,
you imagine? I mean,
it it does happen.
I did have some students in my first birth, and just towards the end, but by which point I didn't care anymore.
But it does happen, and I think again this is where my work with hypnosis is to help women be relaxed no matter what happens. So this is the my aim. But there
Mm.
is the other thing too, that you were talking about, the baby crawling up, and of course, what did that remind me of? It reminded me of the way that kittens do exactly that kneading action,
Hmm.
stimulate the milk.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not sure, but I think puppies might do the same, but certainly kittens, I know they do that. And it is one of the reasons why, if you have a cat, your cat will do that kneading action on you, because it's that feeling of comfort that comes back from when they were kittens with their mums,
Yeah.
stimulating thing. And here you are talking about human babies
Mm,
actually doing that same thing,
mm,
which helps the placenta come along,
mm.
and I presume also would stimulate the breast.
Well, yeah. I mean, at this point, there is no milk yet. It's just colostrum, but they know where it is. They know where to go if they haven't been drugged. You see, the thing is, if you give a woman in labor medication, it does go through to the baby. They come out very groggy and they can't really, sort of focus and that. I mean, some babies come out and they're like right there, eye contact, boom. And others are just, leave me alone, let me go back to sleep. It it just depends. But the modern Western way is to inject them as soon as they come out of the womb with various things. So that's a kind of a nasty shock to the system, and they do take a tiny droplet of blood as well, which is a bit of a weird thing to do. And I'm not quite sure when they started doing that, but women can refuse. The parents can refuse both of those things. But it's become such a habitual thing that the midwives and the doctors just assume everyone's going to go along with it unless you do say, no, thank you. So, yeah.
Well, you have given us a real insight on so many things, from acupuncture to um, pregnancy to birth. This has been a conversation that has been um, going off in many different directions, which is, of course, the beauty of it and the fact that it is so very stimulating. June, thank you so much for your time. And if there's a man or a woman out there who thinks, I need this lady's help, how do they find you?
Well, I have got um, all the various social media things. I have got a Rumble channel myself, although I don't do enough to keep ticking it over. And I've started a Substack, but that's also kind of been neglected. My website is sadly neglected. I've just moved my clinic and I'm so busy. That's my excuse. But yeah, so I've my email, june.tranmer@pm.me. That's the
What is your
easiest.
what is your website?
Just junetranmer.co.uk.
I'll be putting a link to that in the description box. And
Or my link tree. I mean, you might use my link tree because that would just take people to everything.
that's right.
That
So
would be easier. I can give you that.
yeah, that would be wonderful. We'll make sure that that's in the description box.
Okay.
June, thank you once again for sharing the wealth of experience that you have with us today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking deep into ourselves. Until then, and before I say goodbye, do remember to check the description box for June's details so you can find her, as well as my own website and Substack. Have a great week. Goodbye.